So here it is, the week of Halloween. I realize every year that I've done these videos, the last vlogs all seem to be the hardest. And really, I mean, it's kind of normal, I guess, in a way, because at least in a lot of other years, I mean, I don't end up usually doing anything on Halloween itself or anything really big or important on Halloween itself, and everything's closing down, and it's starting to make that shift to all the holidays that I don't care quite as much about. But this year, despite having stuff to do coming up in this week, it feels like it's hitting a little harder just because I think about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, all the stores seemed to decide that it was time to shut down Halloween and start kicking Christmas into high gear. And I was out at Target this morning, and they had the signs up on the ceiling hanging down advertising Halloween stuff, but the Halloween stuff was all stuffed in a corner and there were big ass Christmas trees and ornaments out. So I don't know, this point of the Halloween season is always disappointing to me, and it sucks because Halloween is the 31st. It's the last day of October, and that never changes, and yet it seems like stores are in such a hurry to get rid of Halloween stuff before Halloween's even here, and I really just don't like that. I guess I can't complain. I've been doing as much Halloween stuff as I can for most of September and October, but I'm really just never ready to see it go, which is why my house looks like this. I guess I can't complain too much. I do just live in this crap. Okay, so I haven't decided where I want to put it, which is why it's sitting randomly above a bunch of records. But I got the Fright Rags Bob Briggs action figure, last drive-in action figure. This is the first one they put out, so it's the more limited release that has the blue shirt. I think they did a kind of open release that's a red shirt version, and then I guess this one's probably not the most limited because that Halloween one sold out while I was driving back from the haunt last week, so I had no chance of getting that one. But no, I thought it was kind of cool. I'm not big on retro style figures, but I made an exception for this one because I really do enjoy the last drive-in, and I honestly kind of hope they make a Darcy one because I feel like she's kind of a really big part of that show, or maybe two really big parts of that show. So it'd be cool to include her in the figure line since they've done 3 Joe Bobs now. So I am out here at 13th floor haunted house. Never been to this one before. I was kind of confused because the one that used to be around the last few years, I think it might have been gone last year as well, but it was Warehouse 31. So, yeah, it's a dyslexic's worst nightmare, I think, these 2 haunted houses in Jax. So I've never been to this one, mostly because it's kind of at a weird location here in town. So the way they're doing it is you have to go online and buy your ticket for a certain, time block. So I got mine from, I think it was 9 to 9:15 or something like that. So I'm a little early. I'm not sure. I might want to just go get in line sooner or later. I'm not really sure how they're doing it in that respect. But it's relatively crowded for a Wednesday night. It is the week of Halloween, of course, but a middle of the week night, I wasn't really sure what I'd be seeing in terms of a crowd, so it's kind of good to see there's people out here. Freshly out of 13th floor, while they're playing a soft ballady version of Linkin Park's In the End. So this is pretty cool. This was beautifully themed. The set decoration in there is on par with anything Universal does, I think, to be quite honest. You go inside and they're just kind of pulsing everybody through by group, trying to keep everybody separate, and you're in this basically it's a facade where it's you're outside, but there's this old building there, and then you get your party, which in my case was just me, gets to the front of the line area, and then a actor will come out and bring you into this room, tells you to stare in this mirror and say Bloody Mary 3 times. Disappointed it wasn't Candyman. But then he basically tells you, okay, go around this corner and just keep going. Don't stop. And unfortunately, my version of go and don't stop is a bit faster than normal people. It's not I'm scared of things. I think that might actually be the problem, is I'm not scared of things. I'll jump if something startles me, but I don't know, a lot of people do that thing where, oh, I'm scared, I'm gonna go backwards and stop moving and don't want to progress. I don't know. But some of the stuff in there was just crazy. The beginning had a lot of animatronics animatronics. There were a lot of like rooms, and every so often like somebody would jump out of like a closet or something, but it was super dark in there. Probably one of the darkest haunted houses I've been to, outside of maybe Warehouse 31. It was also local here. I think Warehouse 31, I literally had parts where I could not see at all. This place, they always had some kind of light going off somewhere to give you an idea as to where you need to go, which I appreciated. They had like a fog, like almost like you're going into the mirror effect. And I'm sorry if my eye line is like all over the place. I keep just people watching by accident instead of focusing on my video. But they had like a smoke and like laser effect that made it look like there was like a barrier in front of you. I honestly had to like test it to make sure it was not like a piece of plexiglass or something. So that was kind of cool. There was no real cohesive theme. I think the theme was supposed to be Bloody Mary because it kind of begins and ends with a Bloody Mary thing, but none of the scares really seemed to me to be Bloody Mary themed. The first part I think was a lot of like you're in a house and seeing just like a kitchen with people cooking on the stove and bedrooms where people are mutilated and things like that. And then kind of the second section was a lot of, I don't know what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like a cabin or like a boat or something, but a lot of areas where the floor was uneven. So it was like wood panel floor, almost like a rope bridge that had a lot of slack in it, but didn't have far to drop. So it was just constantly keeping you off your center of balance. Different parts where you had to go up a couple stairs and then down a couple stairs to get through this loop where they'd have you go through and see some stuff. They had some animatronics, like some animatronic zombies in there, so it was kind of nice. Like they could have things there that weren't scare actors. They also had a room you walked into with like a chicken wire like ceiling above you that would drop repeatedly. I think you even had like a corpse hanging below where the final thing of the chicken wire would hit. So that was really neat. I think the next section was kind of more of like a laboratory kind of thing. I'm sure if I check their website, they may actually explain a little bit more of this. I keep bringing it back to Warehouse 31 just because that's the other local haunt. And that one actually had like different houses, but they were all chained together. And this one didn't seem to consider them different houses, but they all it kind of felt like that same idea where you're just constantly like, okay, here's a scary thing, like a scary environment, and then we're going to move on to this other scary environment, then this other scary environment. The lab one was kind of cool. Like it kind of brought you in and out of buildings. There were like areas where there were dumpsters. There were areas where there was like a car crashing through the wall. And then like as you went in, I think this is kind of the area, I think it was about halfway through that second zone, and then more in this one where you start getting more actual scare actors popping up. So it did make it a little bit more immersive as you were going through, and not like you were just going through a house alone. Unfortunately, this is also the part where I caught up to the group in front of me by accident, and I mean, that's fine. I was just like, okay, well, they're here. I'll back off and just kind of wait and give them a little lead time. But the group behind me came up and they were just on my ass. And then eventually they asked if they could pass me to catch up with their family, which I don't care. It's not like we're in line for anything. So yeah, sure, go ahead. And then like shortly after that, there was actually one part where one of the scare actors, I think, made me notice and tried to scare them off the back of me, waited for me to pass, and then they immediately jumped out afterwards to get them to back up, but then they were just right back on me again. So eventually I did let them pass, and then I noticed there was like one of the people working there, like not in costume, like one of the like, I don't know, security or management or whatever was like right behind me too. I'm like, okay, you work here, you can like back up a couple steps, buddy. Like I wasn't doing anything I shouldn't be doing. I was just walking through the place. But eventually he dropped off, and then again I have people behind me because as I'm moving into, I think, the fourth zone, there's like two actors that must have been like coming back from break, and like they're following me through to get to their positions in the house. So it was just like this chain of people like right behind me. I think the scare actors were actually keeping a distance, but it was still kind of weird, you know? The fourth section, I think, if I'm remembering right, and I may be off on this, was kind of like sewer-y. There's like a lot of pipes and a lot of like caution tape looking stuff. And there are a few large animatronics. I don't really, like, it's weird because I just saw them. Like, I'm literally recording this right after I got out, and I can't really remember what they were. They were all kind of just like large, like, you know, maybe 20 foot tall, maybe not even, maybe like 16 to 18 foot tall, kind of skeletal looking things. And they were cool, but there's nothing really like visually memorable about them, if that makes any sense. And then there was also at one point like a Pennywise really it was just Pennywise. I mean, like a fake Pennywise out here out front, but there was like a straight up just Pennywise hanging from the ceiling, like shaking its head against the floors, or the ceiling, I guess, technically. Like just like, doing one of those. And as you're going through, there's like spider webs in the sewer. There's a cool scene where you're actually like over like a sewer grate, and there's like a corpse in the water on one side, and like a snake that comes out the other side. It's like a puppet somebody's controlling. And then you kind of get to an area at the end where there's it looks like you're supposed to step on a plate. And once again, I was like probably too close to the people in front of me. I was keeping, like my 6 foot plus distance from them, but I think I was like, the timed stuff I think was getting a little thrown off. Like I think I missed a couple scares because I was too close to them. The actor hadn't reset yet or whatever. But basically it looks like you were supposed to step on this plate that would turn on this TV monitor where it's like a scientist looking dude explaining that you have to look into the mirror and say Bloody Mary 3 times again, and that will get you out. And then like Bloody Mary jumps out at you and scares you. I think the facade there was supposed to be the same building you went in on, because it had a similar like decrepit look, or it could just been another decrepit building. Who knows? I'm not really sure. And then you basically go down the hallway. There's a picture of Valak on the wall. So like of all the Pennywise stuff, they're at least, pirating off of another popular horror franchise for some fucking reason that thing's popular. And then, it spits you out into, I don't know if this is year round. I don't think this is year round, but the business they have next to is like an axe throwing and an escape room kind of thing. And I think that's year round. I'm relatively certain that's year round. So it kind of spits you out into their other side of the business. They have like a merch thing, which they had a shirt online I really liked. I did not see it here, so I may go order it online because I really liked it. But yeah, like outside of the pacing thing, I think it was really cool. It was, like I said, beautifully themed. They had some really wicked animatronics in it. I wish I would have, not that I wish I would have gone slower, because obviously the people behind me were catching up to me, and I don't want to be that person holding people up, but I do kind of wish I could have appreciated a little more. I think once those people caught up behind me, you can probably kind of tell by the way I'm recounting this, like once the people caught up behind me, my focus was so on the fact that there were people just on my ass. And I know it's like my own neuroses or whatever about shit, but in this time, in this year, if it was last year, I probably wouldn't have cared so much. But like this year, I'm just like, could you just give me like fucking 6 feet, man? Just stay the fuck back, Once that happened, it kind of just took my focus away, and it kind of sucks because it was enjoyable. And I will probably go back next year. I'm probably not going to go back this year because there's not much time left, and I've got other stuff to try to do. But it was well worth it. So 13th floor, definitely giving that my thumbs up. I will say the other thing I meant to say kind of at the beginning of this is, I think one of the reasons I hadn't done this one in prior years is because I don't know if this is a chain or if this is just something carrying on the name legacy or what it really is. And I could be misremembering this. But when I was in like middle school, I lived in Dallas, and I believe 13th floor was a house out there. And I just remember like they'd have things like, it would be one of those things where the local metal station would go broadcast from the house, and that one they always talked about being like, it's in an abandoned building and there's like helicopters flying over, like they're searching for an escaped criminal and like all this stuff, and stories of people like just passing out because they were so scared and things like that. And like I've never had a haunted house affect me like that. I'm sure some of the extreme haunts would freak me the hell out. I like this in the same way I like horror movies. It's a safe horror thing, So I'm not really looking to be so scared that I literally shit my pants or pass out or whatever, but I'm looking to have fun. But just like in my mind, I think just from those commercials when I was a kid, and like I said, I could be wrong, it may not have been 13th floor, or I may be thinking of a different house, but 13th floor was another one that existed and advertised in Dallas at the time in like the early 2000s. So if anybody remembers, anybody lived there around, would have been like between 99 and 04 probably. Maybe somebody remembers and they could tell me in the comments if I'm just crazy or not. But I think that's why I avoided this one, because it just, in my memory, it was like, 13th floor, that one's just fucking brutal, man. No, it's not. It's no scarier than a Halloween Horror Nights or the other haunts I've been to, but it was well done. All right, this is what I think is going to be the last unboxing for this October vlog series, Halloween vlog series I should call it, because I know this goes past or earlier than October, but this is a piece I've been wanting to add to my collection for a while now, and not always the easiest to come by. And there we go. Second unboxing in a row. A Cesar mask. And this is the Merry Clown mask. And this, this copy is definitely a little beat up. But I kind of like that vintage look to it, the kind of weathered look to it. But this is a mask. It's been in a lot of things. Like, it's funny because I've seen movies and it's just like randomly in the background in certain movies. But specifically, this was used in Halloween Resurrection. It's the mask that the mental patient is wearing, as is John Wayne Gacy mask. I think I saw it in the background of Trick or Treat, the 1986 film. I think it has some like weird ties to like Slipknot or something. But yeah, it's just a really cool vintage mask, and I'm happy to finally have one in my collection. Alright, so got it up on the shelf, got it a little bit stuffed. Definitely looking better than it did out of the box. Straight out of the box, I was a little concerned because it was misshapen quite a bit. And I know I don't have a lot of vinyl masks in my collection. I know the Laurel mask was kind of similarly just like really not, I don't know, it's weird. Like, like a latex mask always seems to want to like kind of pop back into shape. Like, yeah, if I push the nose in, it doesn't take much for it to just pop right back out to what it's supposed to be. Like this, and it could also be the age on it, but you push in on it. Now, of course, now it's going to comply, but like, I don't know. It seems to like want to stick in whatever position you stick it in. So it is just a little, oh, Jesus Christ. All right, I'm going to stop messing with it. So it is like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. It seems a little easier to deform than the masks I'm used to. So I think I was a little nervous as I got it out of the box because it just seemed really just smushed. And also just like the way it's made, like there's not a lot back there. Like the hair is attached somewhere back here, but like, it's kind of like a face mask with hair coming down the back more or less. So it doesn't have like the structure I'm used to a mask having, like something in my collection at least. So I don't know, it just kind of freaked me out a little bit. You might have heard it in my voice as I was unboxing it, but I was like, oh crap, did I get like scammed or something? But the more I look at it, the more I'm like, it looks right. I found some other pictures of other people's online that have similar things, like where the red of the nose is kind of oversprayed and things like that. So I'm a little less nervous than I was. And plus I looked up some of the Chinese knockoff ones and I'm like, no, it definitely doesn't look like those. So I think I'm good. But yeah, so there it is. I got it obviously next to my Resurrection mask. So, right now I've got, this is like my later middle Myers movies, I guess. So the 4 masks, which I want to get the bandage mask up there. And then the 5 and 6. And then 7 and 8 will be down here. Okay, I gotta admit, these new Gwar Instagram filters are pretty kick-ass. I was actually kind of considering doing a beefcake costume at some point. I started to do the old Blothar one a while back and never finished it. So, this could be like an idea of how I could make this look. So I could try the current Blothar, which is huge, doesn't fit on screen. Then I could try throwing on my... it just covers it. No, you can't decide. The old Blothar helmet versus the new design. All right, so sadly, the month of Halloween. Yeah, the month of October, the Halloween season has come to an end. So to close out the month, I kind of want to do 3 things all at once here, just while I'm sitting in front of the camera. I want to just do a quick rundown of the movies I watched this month, because I actually did manage to do at least 1 movie a day for the entire month of October. And that ends with the event I went to on Halloween night. And then today is actually November 1st when I'm filming this. And I went and acted like a vulture and picked over some cool stuff I could find at some of the Spirit Halloweens around here. So I'm going to show that off here at the very end. And I've got my list up on my computer over here, so if I'm constantly looking off to the side, that's why. But first movie I watched was Beyond the Door, which I already talked about back on I think the 2nd or 3rd video in this series. I did a quickie review on it. Really enjoyed that one. Had a lot of fun. It was dumb, but hilarious. Second night I actually covered as well. That was the Drive-In with Creature from the Black Lagoon and Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Third was Urban Legend. I had never seen this one. It was completely new to me. Didn't really care for it. I'm not a huge fan of 90s horror. There's just something about the aesthetic. I think it's the fact they always have like these super clean-cut 30-year-olds playing college students or whatever, and it just never sits right with me. So I just wasn't a fan of that one. On the 4th, I watched Tales of Halloween, which is a movie I really enjoy and one that I try to watch every Halloween season. On the 5th, I watched Inside, and I watched it, I believe, on Hulu, and I thought that it was a movie I'd heard good things about, but I didn't remember what I'd heard about it or anything like that. It turns out the movie that I was thinking of was the original movie, which I believe was French, and this was the English language remake of it, and it had some okay moments, but it really wasn't that great. I guess I'll try to track down the French one eventually, but that was just a mistake on my part, thinking I was watching something that had high praise and it was really just the crappy remake of it. On the 6th, I watched At Midnight I'll Take Your Soul, which is one of the Coffin Joe films, which is a Brazilian horror character, I think from the 60s. Never seen that one either. I felt like it was a little slow moving for my taste, but it was overall pretty interesting. I have the trilogy on DVD, so I do plan on finishing out watching those. I just didn't get to any of them this month. On the 7th, I watched Monster Party. This was on Shudder, and the premise sounded really cool. This was about a group of burglars accidentally going into a house full of recovering serial killers. No spoilers there theoretically, because that's the blurb on Shudder. We don't find out really about the serial killers until late in the movie. And I don't know, when you have like a thing where you have people who are supposed to be dangerous or whatever in their own right going up against more dangerous people, I always think the Predator rule should apply. Like in Predator, you have the team going in and you see them bust up that compound. You see these guys are like super skilled at the top of their game. They know what they're doing. And then when you see them struggling against a Predator, it's automatically showing, okay, this Predator is super dangerous because these guys just mopped the floor with a bunch of humans and now they're just struggling against one thing. But this movie didn't do that. So I feel like it led it to be just this really awkward struggle of a film that didn't work for me in the least. On the 8th, I believe that's when my Friday the 13th box set came in, so I ended up watching part 5 and 6. On the 9th, going back to my Predator rules thing, I watched Scarecrow, which was basically Predator with scarecrows instead of an alien, and I really enjoyed it. I'd heard about it, I'd never seen it before, but that's one that I had a lot of fun watching, and I'll definitely be revisiting that one in the future. On the 10th, another one that I covered in this a little bit before, I went to another drive-in double feature of Psycho and The Thing, both absolute classics. It was the John Carpenter Thing, in case anybody's unsure about that. On the 11th, I watched Primal Rage, which was like a Sasquatch movie. It was interesting, but I don't know, I didn't get super into it, but I think some of the premise had potential. It just didn't quite get where I wanted it to be. The 12th, I watched The Invisible Man Returns, another new one for me. I'd only ever really seen the original and the remake, and I have the box set that has all the other like sequels in it. Yeah, another one didn't work super well for me. The original Invisible Man is one of my absolute favorites of like Universal horror, so it had a high bar to go up against, and I got kind of confused with the plot in this one. Like it just was hard to tell like who was doing what at some points, especially because the characters are invisible, or at least some of them are. So I don't know. I just didn't have a whole lot of enjoyment with that one. On the 13th, I watched In Search of Darkness, which is like a 4.5-hour documentary on 80s horror. I really enjoyed that. I love like documentaries and stuff like that. There's another one coming up later on the list. And I actually did the other night order the In Search of Darkness 2 that comes with a copy of the first one. So I'll actually be adding that to my collection pretty soon. On the 14th, should have done it a day earlier, but I went back to the Friday the 13th well and watched part 4. I think this got to the point where I was having some nights where I just didn't have the time to watch a movie, but I'd hit such a streak at this point that I was sometimes just choosing things that were like comfort food movies for me, things that I had seen a billion times, that if I wasn't paying the most attention while watching it, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. So I think that's kind of about this time when you start seeing a few less new to me movies and a lot more like stuff that I've watched a million times. On the 15th, though, was another new one for me. It was Revenge of Frankenstein, which is I believe the second Hammer Frankenstein film. This one was cool. The Hammer Frankenstein films are very different than what I kind of know from, I'm used to the Universal Frankenstein ones where it's the same monster coming back over and over. It's really focused more on the monster than it is on Dr. Frankenstein. And Hammer focuses very heavily on the doctor instead and has different monsters each movie as far as I'm aware. Kind of worked through most of the Dracula movies in the Hammer franchise. So I really do want to try to like clean out the rest of the Frankensteins and see the rest of that saga. On the 16th was another new one for me, Alice Sweet Alice. Really enjoyed this one. It was very well done. I think it was from the 70s and it had very much that style. It had some decent suspense in it, some kind of crazy stuff happening. I really, really enjoyed it. On the 17th, I watched Trick or Treat, which another one that I watch every year. It's tradition at this point. On the 18th, I watched two movies. I watched The Mothman Prophecies, which was okay. I was expecting something with a little more monsters in it. And I didn't realize it was more like what you call it, like a thriller or whatever they call those movies that are like, it would be a horror movie if you put a monster in it, but we're not going to put a monster in it type things. I don't know. And then I also watched Books of Blood, which is the movie based on the Clive Barker books on Hulu. I think it was supposed to be a series on Hulu, and then they decided to make it a movie instead, which I think I heard was because of COVID that they didn't have time to film more of the episodes they were going to do. So I've never read the Books of Blood. I intend to get around to them eventually. But my understanding is that only one of the stories in this was actually based off of Clive's books. And the main story in it, the one that seems the longest at least, was just very, very odd. And the middle section, which I think was based on Clive's book, I did like. That was a cool one. I actually enjoyed that. It had a very Hellraiser feel, so I'm very willing to believe it was based on one of his books. And then the end thing kind of tied everything together in a weird way. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. They reference something in the last bit at the very end of the movie, and I won't spoil it, but it's something that happened recently enough and was a real life tragedy that it seemed really scuzzy to use it in the movie the way they used it. That whole thing is, if something's in bad taste, it's the old definition of pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Like, yeah, it didn't sit right with me at all. And, you know, I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to a lot of stuff, of like, you know, using inspiration from things, but I don't know, man. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I was not comfortable with what they did. On the 19th, I watched Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, which is another documentary, one I've seen before, but I really enjoy. It's narrated by Lance Henriksen, so like, you know, you could just have him reading the phone book and it would sound good. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, I think it's on Amazon. Kind of goes through like American horror movies and talks a little bit about like the social and political climate around the time certain things were happening. And it's just something to have on the background. I don't think it's something you want to sit down, like grab a bowl of popcorn for to watch, but it's enjoyable. It's a cool little like history of the horror film. The 20th, I watched Poltergeist 2. Hadn't watched this one in a while, but I love Kane in it. One of the most underrated horror villains, I think, of all time, but definitely a fun watch. 21st, I watched Pool Party Massacre, a movie I had seen the filmmakers promoting at Spooky Empire years ago at this point, and I'd never gotten around to watching it. It was on Amazon, so I figured I'd finally give it a shot. The movie feels like they had set up a shot for a porno, and then the director had walked off set, and then a horror director walked on and was like, hey, I can make a slasher film out of this. And if that sounds good to you, you'll probably enjoy it. If that sounds terrible to you, you'll probably hate it. Kind of liked it. 22nd, I watched Return of the Vampire, which is a Bela Lugosi vampire movie. Since he really was only Dracula the one time, it's kind of, in my mind, a sequel to Dracula in a weird way, like him picking up as a vampire again. Fun old-timey flick. On the 23rd, I watched Halloween Resurrection. And before you ask why that was the first Halloween movie I watched this month, it's because, as you saw earlier in this video, I got my Merry Clown mask, which is something they used in that film. And yeah, I was just in the rare mood that I wanted to revisit Halloween Resurrection. The 24th, another comfort food movie, I watched Digging Up the Marrow. It's an Adam Green film. It's like pseudo found footage. One I really enjoy. One I feel is underrated in his catalog. One I really wish he'd make a sequel to, because I feel like the world building in it could have gone so much further and been so crazy. I would have really liked to see that. 25th, another movie I really love, Hills Run Red. Great slasher from the 2000s, kind of coming in that same era where we're getting like Hatchet and Leslie Vernon and all that kind of stuff, the slasher renaissance kind of thing going on, but one that I feel like is a little bit more ignored than the other ones. So if you haven't seen that one, I do recommend tracking that down. 26th, I watched The Last Broadcast. I'd only watched it once, and this is the movie that was like found footage that came out right before Blair Witch, I think. It beat Blair Witch to the punch, but Blair Witch got all the attention because they did things the way they did them, especially that viral marketing and all that, I think helped them, whereas Last Broadcast kind of got left behind in the shadows a little bit. I will say, I don't like the ending of it, but the rest of the movie really works, and I think it was a really good exploration of the idea of doing found footage back before it was a trend that everybody did and we were all sick of. And now, of course, like, people don't even credit that as the first found footage because everybody goes back to Cannibal Holocaust. I don't really feel like Cannibal Holocaust is really a found footage movie. I think it has found footage elements, but I don't think it was really as fully found footage as Last Broadcast and Blair Witch ended up being. On the 27th, ironically enough, I watched a movie called Halloween Homecoming. This is a fan edit of Resurrection. I had no intention of watching Resurrection twice in 1 month, but it got posted up and I really wanted to watch it because I wasn't sure, given how YouTube is, how long it would really be available. I figured it could very easily be taken down very quickly. I think there was a download link, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure I watched it while it was still up there, and it was, a relatively easy thing to do on YouTube. It was an interesting edit of the film. They tried to tie it in basically so that it was directly coming off of the original Halloween. And I think they tried to imply that after being attacked by Michael, Laurie goes nuts, and that's why she's in the asylum in Resurrection. They cut down almost all of Busta Rhymes' scenes. They even credit him by his real name instead of, like, his stage name. They cut out the entire, Decker party scene stuff, all that. That's completely excised from it. They add in some clips from the alternate opening and the TV version of Halloween to kind of pad out the runtime for the stuff that was cut. They do some CG work. I think they black out Myers' eyes in every single shot you see of him. They make some changes where, the cameras that the people in the house are wearing on them are now night vision once it gets dark out, so it gives it a little bit of a more believable look. It was interesting. You could tell they put a lot of effort into doing it. I forget the name of the person who did the edit offhand, so I do apologize for that, but it was a really interesting take. It was cool to see somebody's interpretation and trying to make that movie, which is notorious as being one of the worst Halloween movies, into something a little bit better. On the 28th, I watched Halloween 2018 to make up for maybe some of the lackluster Halloweens I watched. And I also watched Haunt, because I was at that haunted trail. I had missed the last drive-in version of it, so I caught back up with that on Shudder. Still need to watch Hack-O-Lantern, but I did watch the first half of the show with Joe Bob and his commentary on it. 29th, kind of cheated, because technically neither one of these are really movies, but I watched two things. So I'm gonna say I watched at least a movie's worth of content. So one was the animated Creepshow special, which I think was only 45 minutes, but it was interesting. Another thing on Shudder. I like the reboot Creepshow series, but this one left me a little cold. The first story I didn't care for too much, and then the second story felt like an old person trying to write as a, cell phone addicted Zoomer, and it just did not work at all. And it felt more like bitching about kids these days type, get off my lawn kind of crap, more so than it felt like, an authentic representation of a kid that age. And the other thing I watched was the Gwarnage campaign, which is Gwar back in the year 2000. The reason I wanted to watch it is because it was a election time concert video. Basically, their manager, Sleazy P. Martini, kills off Bush and Gore and becomes the winner of the presidential election and sells the earth to aliens for some gold. Promptly kills those aliens. It's available on YouTube. Also, if you have the audio, I think the CD version was called You're All Worthless and Weak. Has a couple different tracks mixed up between the two. But I did realize at the end of it, it was filmed on Halloween night. So technically it is a Halloween movie, right? That counts. And honestly, that was just hype because on the 30th, Gwar did their 30th anniversary of Scumdogs of the Universe show, which they also played a semi-restored, version of Live from Antarctica, their concert DVD or VHS, really. It was definitely VHS quality from around the time that Scumdogs came out. And then this new version, which was really good, pre-recorded, not really live, but it was a really good, concert video for them playing for no crowd. And then later that night, I watched for the first time John Dies at the End. Really enjoyed that one. I don't know why. I've owned it for so long. I haven't watched it. I think I started watching it once and for some reason couldn't get into it, which I don't understand why. I was trying to think of where I stopped the first time and why I would have stopped, but I don't know. To me, Coscarelli just makes movies that I want to watch. I enjoy pretty much the whole Phantasm series, especially the first four. Bubba Hotep's one of my favorites. So yeah, I'm kicking myself for not having watched this one sooner. And then on the 31st, I was back at the drive-in. And hey, my screen went to sleep right as soon as I got to the last bit. So the last double feature for Halloween that I attended at the drive-in was Monster Squad and the original Halloween.
Hey, by noise and horns and all that fun stuff. How you doing this evening? Happy Halloween to you. My goodness, thanks so much for being here for our last night of Halloween at the drive-in. This special presentation of Monster Squad.
So I figured it is Halloween, so I figured people might dress up. So I ended up taking my little H1 style. It's not perfect because I just poorly carved it for a thing at work. But it's a little fake jack-o'-lantern. I stuck a light in it, put it at the end of the tailgate of my truck. And I grabbed my Hobo Myers costume, except I grabbed my hospital scene mask instead. Just kind of was feeling doing something different instead of just the half mask or whatever. I got there, I kind of got dressed and everything. And then I was like, it's a little too warm. So I ended up just using the coveralls and the mask and didn't wear most of the rest of the gear, the coat and the vest and all that stuff. But as I was sitting in the bed of my truck watching Monster Squad, which I love, that movie's so much fun. It was interesting because there were a lot of kids in the audience. I think they started trying to do this where the first movie was a little more family friendly and the second movie maybe a little more intense. So it was interesting to see, like, there was a truck next to me full of kids and I don't know how old they were. I'm terrible at guessing the ages of children, but you know, it was interesting to see, especially like, you know, the reveal of like who Scary German Guy really is. Like, they just didn't get it, which, I mean, I'm kind of glad little kids don't get what the Holocaust reference is, but I was just curious because I only ever saw that movie as an adult. So it's not something I'd really thought about until that moment where I'm like, oh, are these kids even going to know what the hell's going on with this scene? I think they thought he was Van Helsing, which I guess would make sense, you know, to a kid.
Drive-in Halloween at the drive-in. Tonight's our last night. How are you all doing this evening? That sounds lovely. Thank you all so much for being here, for joining us this evening. This is our last film here before our Sunray Pizza Cave and drive-in staff take a little vacation. 130 people this evening, all here to watch the 1978 classic, John Carpenter's Halloween.
But when I looked at the forecast earlier in the day, it wasn't really supposed to rain that much, but it ended up just like pouring on and off throughout the show. So, you know, I'm sitting there in these relatively heavy coveralls that are now just like soaked with water, and I kept like, when it would start raining hard, I'd grab the Hobo Myers vest and put that on so I could flip the hood up so I could keep the rain off the mask and stuff. But not far into Halloween, I think I made it to the part where the girls are walking home from school, and I was just kind of sick of sitting there in soggy coveralls, so I ended up getting back into the truck and watching from inside the rest of the movie. The audio was no problem because the way they have this set up is fantastic, where they actually have speakers outside, but if you go in the car, you could tune it on your radio station. But the problem is my truck was facing bed towards the screen. I couldn't really move it. So I started trying to just like, you know, turn around and look behind me the whole time, and it was just really uncomfortable. So I ended up watching most of the movie out of my like side view mirror, which is definitely not the best way to watch the movie. But I've seen Halloween a million times, so, you know, if I wanted to, I could have gotten out and watched in the rain, but I just wasn't feeling it. So it's my own fault for not preparing for the weather we ended up getting. But whatever. So Monster Squad was a lot of fun. The Halloween experience wasn't as great. And like I mentioned earlier, today I went out to the closing Spirit Halloweens. I actually had one by me that I stopped in on Halloween morning, and they were actually closing that day. They weren't even staying open the day after. I've never seen a Spirit do that. I thought they always stay open an extra day. Everything was 50% off, so I started grabbing some stuff that I'd kind of been considering. I didn't go super early in the morning. I think if I'd gone early, I probably could have grabbed some real gems, like gotten maybe some Tots masks or stuff like that would have been really cool to have, but I ended up just grabbing the stuff that I kept kind of pushing off for most of the year or for most of the season. So I got this Elm Street sign. It's similar to the Haddonfield sign I picked up last year. So I also got the Crystal Lake sign that they have. So this was kind of like the missing piece of the puzzle of the three. So glad to grab that. I also grabbed a Trick or Treat mug because I'm obsessed with Trick or Treat. So had to have that. Speaking more of Trick or Treat, they had these little, I think they're light up pumpkins. I don't know where the switch is. It might be under the price tag. But yeah, it's a little tiny Trick or Treat pumpkin. I figure if I ever go back to the office, this working from home stuff ever ends, I could put this on my desk at work. And then giving Michael Doherty more of my money, I grabbed the Krampus throw. Why is that hard to say? I keep wanting to say grab the campus. Grab the Krampus throw that they had, as well as the Trick or Treat one. Then I stopped at another one, and while none of them had a lot of Tots masks, I ended up stopping, I think, at 4 total, but I did find this Abraham Lincoln Purge mask, so that was cool. And then because they had that one, I ended up just grabbing one of these cheapo masks that kind of look like the one from the first Purge movie. Figure might as well have it as a placeholder. I do want to eventually get ones that look a little closer to the movie itself, but this isn't too bad. And then continuing on what seems like a theme now, I picked up a Krampus mug, so like everything I got Trick or Treat, I ended up getting a Krampus thing, except for that pumpkin. It's the only one that I didn't get the matching piece. Actually, that's not true, because I did pick up a sand magnet. Also stopped at Target while I was out there, but I ended up finding the Gremlins Back to School figure. Wasn't going to pick this up right away. I really didn't feel the need to get it like ASAP, but to be quite honest, like the NECA exclusives at Target have been so hit or miss lately. I don't want to risk not being able to get it if I want it. So I picked it up. I may not open it right away because I don't really know if I want it, but I'd rather have it on hand and decide to return it than skip on it at the store and then realize that nobody can find the damn things. I'm sure because I got it, it's going to be a peg warmer, but I don't know. I can't trust it anymore. Last but not least, I stopped at Best Buy and picked up Scare Package. This was on Last Drive-In a while back, I think, but I really enjoyed it. Good little anthology series. I think they did some interesting things with it. And honestly, like some of the best bonus features I've read in a while. So it was on Last Drive-In, if you can't tell by all the packaging here with Shutter and Last Drive-In plastered all over it. So it actually contains the Joe Bob episode. And then, I love this, creators' commentary on the film, commenting on other films that have better commentary tracks. I don't know what the hell that really means, but that sounds amazing. It sounds so dumb. And then the original not as good ending. So sadly, that closes out the Halloween vlogs for 2020. Hoping 2021 will be a little more action-packed. I know some of these, I know to me felt like a bit of a slog because I didn't have too many great things to do, but I did end up doing quite a bit. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I did a lot and then not anything at all. So I feel like that's kind of a summary of the year too. But yeah, I do appreciate everybody who's tuned in with these over the course of the last month and a half. And I guess now that I don't have this as an excuse, I got to start trying to review some figures again or something, right? But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Happy Halloween.